in this awkward though. I mean, LSAT business is pretty active right now, but I think it's a little late for this current cycle. Like it's kind of late to still be working on essays. And on the other token, it's kind of early for the fall. Not to say it's bad to start early because more time never hurts, but it is, you guys are, if you're applying for next cycle, a little bit ahead of the game. That being said, good to be ahead, just kind of an interesting point. And yeah, let me play with the permissions real quick. I should have done that while we sat here because I always forget to do that. In these really big ones, we can run into real issues. So I turn off a lot of things like actually I will let you guys unmute yourselves. If that becomes an issue, I will make it an issue. But it should be fine. All right, fantastic. So that's all good to go. So yeah, what we'll do here today is basically talk through how to apply. Oh man, I did format this presentation just not the way I wanted to. So whoops. But it's still good. It's just I wanted to have a summary slide at the front. I guess I totally spaced on that. So yeah, real quick, I guess we'll touch on cycles. Generally, applying early is better because you're just putting yourself in a position where the schools have less seats filled. The deeper in the cycle you get, the fewer seats they have to give out because they've already given out a bunch and they've already given out a bunch of money, and hence their standards raise. Because like now, if they only have 5 seats left, you really have to knock their socks off to get one of those seats. Where at the beginning of the cycle, theoretically, they have hundreds of seats and they're just willing to like give them out like candy. That being said, like if you're a terrible candidate in September 1st, you're still going to get rejected. And if you're a really awesome candidate in like April, you'll still get in. But it also comes down to the scholarship aspect, which is schools know that they're in a more of a power position later in the cycle. And the reason they give you scholarship for law school is to pull you away from another school. And they know they really don't have to do that deeper in the cycle because you're not in a position of power. They know you don't have other options often. So they're less likely to give you scholarship. So if you're trying to maximize money, which I really would advocate, the offers tend to be substantially better early in the cycle. Now, if you have a 4.0 and like a 175 and you're applying in April, you're going to do fine. You're going to get some good offers. But for folks like, with more reasonable numbers, which almost everyone has, very few people kind of fall into that like 99th percentile LSAT and 99th percentile GPA, not a very big group of people. I would really advocate for waiting until next cycle. You can always apply and see what your offers are, but universally they tend to be pretty bad. And I find people can get suckered in by an offer that's really not what they're worth, but they're so attached to going this cycle that they go to a substantially worse school at a substantially worse price. And had they just waited a year, they would have gotten into a much better school, which really does change the trajectory of your career in terms of finances, how much you're going to make, all that stuff. So generally waiting a year is advantageous. It is, not black and white. Very few things are, but as a general rule, I'd say you should be waiting until next year at this point. Okay, well, let's dive in. The goal today is to talk through a few statements, as well as just kind of make a game plan for if you're applying next cycle, like all the things you have to get done, which does bring me to, if you are applying for next cycle, I'm currently working on a free admissions book. I started this yesterday and I'm a decent ways into it, but I'm probably going to get that out. I want to say, well, like realistically, hopefully by like mid-April, though I'm going to give myself extra time and say I'll have it done by May, just so that, it's more time than you always want to under promise. So that should be out soon. If you're on my email list, you'll get a blast about that with like a free link to download. It's just trying to put everything here in a more like coherent, thought out way so that you have it in written format to like reference back to. But yeah, otherwise, what do we have? Otherwise, yeah, we'll just talk through kind of all the logistics, basic mistakes. We're not going to cover literally everything because that's impossible, but we'll touch on a good amount. And yeah, cool. Yeah, LLMs, that's fine. Generally, I advise against. I don't know about transferring to a JD from an LLM. I'd probably just apply as a JD. I don't know. That's such a weird situation. I haven't dealt with that much. But yeah. So real quick, the first thing that's important to know is that law schools evaluate you primarily based on your numbers. That doesn't mean that your other things don't matter, but it does mean that you don't want to miss the forest for the trees. Like if you're focusing on your personal statement, but you're just bombing the LSAT, you should probably reshift your focus towards the LSAT. That being said, if you're doing LSAT study and in your extra time, you want to work on your essays, that's great. But what I don't want you guys doing is like procrastinating the LSAT so that you can do your essays. Like, yes, your essays do matter. I'm not going to say they have no impact, but they are substantially less impact than your LSAT and your GPA. It is worth noting that your GPA is probably set in stone. I would emphasize it more, but for most of you, you're out of undergrad, so like it's not a thing to even consider. But if you are still in undergrad, make sure you're getting good grades. If you take all the easy freshman classes to get a 4.0, like do that. Most law schools don't care. Will Harvard be snobby about it? Like, yeah, probably. But will basically any school outside of like the top 5 care? Like, no, they don't have enough choices. They have to take the 4.0 because of their rankings. I won't go into a whole expose about why the law schools are so numbers oriented. If you want it, it's the first episode of my podcast, but basically it's following the money. Like in admission and really in anything, you should always understand the incentives. Why are people doing what they do? And in law school, their incentives are to follow the numbers because the numbers guarantee they get more money, which guarantees they, get more revenue for their school. They're less likely to get fired. They're more likely to get a big promotion. So that's the gist of it. Now the essays aren't irrelevant because if you like totally can't write, that is a problem and they will see that. And alternatively, you can also make a connection to help you. Like if you really connect with an admissions officer, that can help your admissions chances. I'm not here to say it doesn't. People do tend to overestimate how often that happens because you really have to have an awesome essay. And most people don't. As like for full transparency, everyone submits their personal statement thinking they've crushed it. And having read many of them, very few people crush it on the first go around. Everyone has good stuff. Like you all have a story in you, but a lot of people really struggle actually putting that on paper. So yeah, the goal of today's session is not diversity statements. That was from a while ago. It is personal statements / strategy. I also meant to pull statements, but I didn't. So if anyone wants their statement to get free feedback, you can just shoot an email to me with it attached. I will blur out your name so no one knows who's whose. But if you want it, shoot me an email. We'll go through that. And yeah, real quick, this section of the BS of law school admissions. There's a lot of nonsense in this space, and primarily it comes back to money. Like for example, there's places that'll tell you like the LSAT doesn't really matter. There's some accounts that do that. It's just not shown by the stats. Like the schools care about LSAT so much, and they also care about GPA a ton. People just don't focus on the GPA, one, because I can't sell you anything to fix it, nor can anyone else. And then two, it's set in stone. People can't change it. So when people are like saying your essays are the most important thing, they're not. They're important, but like the idea that your essays are going to overcome a giant LSAT deficiency is just untrue. So yeah, that's that. I should have gone deeper into like other stuff. One of the other ones is the law schools themselves. They all like to think about how they're so prestigious. And a lot of people don't understand kind of the legal market for what it is. Most lawyers are not making $225,000. Most of them are making 70 to 80K, which is totally fine. But don't go into crazy debt for like your local state school to make 70K a year. You're not going to pay it off. It's brutal and you will never get out of it. If anyone wants to go deeper on that, there's a great book on this called Don't Go to Law School Unless. And it was written when the legal market was actually worse than it is now. But if you read that, you should have a very good idea of what you're getting into and what to, do about it. So if you want to go to law school and make money, you very well can. I'm not here to say that like the fancy lawyers don't exist. They certainly do. But it's the minority of law school grads, and you have to set yourself up by going to the proper schools. Now, if you want to like do good in the world, or you already work at a firm and they'll hire you, not a big deal. Just go to a school that will give you a JD. But if you don't have connections in the legal industry and you view this as like a ticket to the upper class, you have to make sure you go to one of these proper schools, or it's just not going to end well. And I find some folks really don't understand that. And a lot of people in my position, they actually play up the idea that law school will make you super rich because it encourages people to sign up for our stuff. If I tell you all you're all going to make 300K your first year as a lawyer, that sounds awesome because like who doesn't want to make that much money? But that's not reality. That's not what happens. And I don't want you guys going in debt for something that's a dream, because it is a dream. If you're going to like the University of Colorado expecting to make 300K, that's not going to happen. It might happen for the valedictorian. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that. Like most people are really not making that much. There's also a website called lawschooltransparency.com, and it breaks down every single law school's salaries upon graduation. So if you are concerned about that, just go, take a look. You'll see that out of like Harvard, Yale, everyone that wants to make 225,000 a year can. Out of Michigan, maybe it's half of the graduates. And then out of like Wayne State, there's like one grad that makes that much. And then there's like 90 making 70K a year. So you just want to be very aware of the situation you're getting into. I'm not super in touch with the legal space, like for what's worth. I try to stay in my depth. I'm very much so admissions focused. This is all legal stuff, and that's not my world, but I do know enough about it. And what I do know is that there's misconceptions. So yeah, it's a lawschooltransparency.com. I just sent that in the chat, and there's a lot of good resources on it. Basically the way you can figure it out is like the way to read law school transparency is, if it'll have them broken down by the firm size. If a firm is over 500 lawyers, they're probably making 225,000. If they're, and it's pretty standard. It's all like 225. They're kind of in lockstep with each other. if they're working basically anywhere else, it tends to be around 60 to 80. There's not a lot of lawyers that graduate and make 120. That's not really a thing. So yeah, it's just worth noting. And I find that to get misrepresented. Like, for example, there's another LSAT account on Instagram where most of you probably found me from that was posting about how much lawyers make. I'm just like, this is factually untrue. Like this, like no one makes this much. Like, what are you talking about? Because what they'll do is they'll search up average lawyer salary, which just takes all the lawyers, all the money, and then divides it, which is totally unrepresentative. Because then the people with the really high salaries, like partner at some firm making 7 million a year, which do exist, they dilute all the like little public defenders making 45K a year. And it chugs out like $100,000 a year, but that's very unrepresentative. There are almost no lawyers that make about 100,000 a year. There's a lot that make like 60, 70, and there's a lot that make like over 200, and there's not a lot in between. And those that make 220, that's like 20, 30% of the legal market. So you all can get in that group, but you have to set yourself up. Going to like random law school won't do it. All right, that was a long bit of me talking about that. I just find it to be really important to understand. A lot of people don't understand it. And if you're going 200K into debt and you're never going to make that much, that's a problem. So yeah, today we're going to go through various things. We'll go through personal statements primarily. I haven't gotten any, but I do have ones I can pull from the archives. So we can do that. And then if you want more stuff, you can always go to my podcast. I have a lot of stuff there, as well as check out the ebook once that's out. It's very much so in a rough draft format. I've only written the first 2 chapters out of 10. So I probably have like another 10 to 15 hours I need to put into it. But the hope is to have it out hopefully by like early to mid-April. At the latest, I'll have it out by May. So count on May, and then hopefully it comes out earlier. But I am working on just to make this all like much more concise and thought through. All right, fun stuff. So yeah, components of your apps. First off, your numbers. This is where you should put your energy primarily. If you don't have the LSAT that you're capable of, you need to get that first. Now, you don't have to spend a ton of money. There are many budget ways to study for the LSAT. I have my courses and free stuff, which I guess my courses aren't the most budget. They're affordable, but like it's still a lot of money. There are cheap ways, like you can do LawHub plus LSAThacks.com if you want basically free LSAT prep. So if you are still studying for that, do reps and then look at the LSAT hacks explanations. It'll make you a better LSAT taker. So yes, is it expensive? It can be, but you can also do it for like $100. So get a good LSAT if you haven't yet. And yeah, other than that, you have all these components. And I'm making a checklist of this in the ebook as well, so you'll have access to that. But basically, you have your personal statement. This is kind of I'd say the good purpose of this, well, we'll get to that, but it's kind of a why statement and then a diversity statement. And this is who you are, like what you bring to the class that is different. So for example, people can go in racial directions, so like ethnic background, LGBT stuff. But there's other ones. Like for example, I had a guy who wrote one about how he was a child with 11 siblings, which is pretty uncommon in the US nowadays. And it was a really powerful diversity statement. Just kind of like about how he was different and how this is a perspective that most people going to law school don't have. And for what's worth, he was Black. So it's not like that's the only thing he could have written about, but he chose to write about that because he found a really powerful story in it. So you don't have to write one. In fact, if you don't have something diverse, don't write one, because a forced diversity statement will read terrible. But almost everyone has one. And it really is just something different. It doesn't have to fall into this neat category of like racial or LGBT. It could be like, being in the military is one. If it applies to a lot of people, I'd avoid it. Like if you were a poli-sci major, don't write your diversity statement on that. I'm sure we have like 20 poli-sci majors here right now, but there are a lot of things. It's not so cut and gray. There are many different directions you can go in. All right, also addendums. Addendums are basically where you explain poor performance in either your grades or your LSAT. And these are pretty bad. In fact, I try to avoid them. Often you have to write one for a GPA. So for example, if you had a bad GPA your freshman year because you were pre-med, you could write an addendum on that. But it always kind of has to be one of those things about improvement. If you had a bad GPA all 4 years and then you're just blaming it on outside circumstances, they're not going to believe you. So it has to actually be about something that's like changed. If you can't point to actual change, don't write one. Additionally, there's LSAT addendums, which I would say almost universally don't write one. The only reason really to write one is if you have like an astronomical score increase, like you went up 30 points, you should write one because they're going to ask about that. And then there's one other case, which is if you scored really bad on the SAT or ACT and then you got like a 4.0 in undergrad, then you can write one to show how standardized tests have not reflected your abilities in the past. However, if you got like a bad SAT score and then you got a 3.0 in undergrad, don't write it. It's not going to help you. And people tend to write them and they go on, and it's really bad. You want to keep these like 3 to 4 sentences, and I will include templates for those in the ebook, which it is on the top of my list. I just don't want to promise a date, but you really want to keep them short, and I'll put that out. Resume, those are fun. Just Google the Harvard ones if you want examples. Harvard law resume examples, they're fantastic. Keep them short, don't include everything. But it's pretty hard to mess that up. You all have good stuff. But yeah, letters of rec. This is a big one because this is the only thing that is out of your control as far as your admissions components. If you ask professors are not always the quickest to get things done. So if you're looking to apply next fall, I would do this like now. If anything's on the top of your to-do list with law school, it should be the LSAT and then letters of rec and then all the rest of this crap. Because letters of rec can take people forever to do. So ask for them now. And generally you just want to ask professor whose class you got an A. So someone who like can say good things about you. You don't have to have done research for them or done something crazy. You could also ask your boss, but you should get at least one academic one, and ideally just go to a professor that you got an A in their class. Don't go to a professor who like really knows you, but you got a B minus because it's just not going to come off well. You also only need about 2. Some schools ask for 3, but generally just need 2. So go to ones that you do well in. And then there are optional essays. There's a lot of these nowadays. Without affirmative action, the admissions process has changed a fair amount. It's hard to know whether or not affirmative action is still a thing in law school, because theoretically, according to the Supreme Court, it's not supposed to be a thing. But also, from what I can see so far this cycle, it appears that underrepresented minorities are still getting a little bit of a boost. Don't take that as gospel because I have a pretty limited sample size. Like I don't work with thousands of people every cycle, so I don't know exactly how it's happening. But from what I see, the law schools still care about composing diverse classes. And because of that, people from underrepresented groups seem to get a little bit of a boost. I don't know how big of a boost that is. In the past, it wasn't even that big. People tend to over exaggerate how much it helped, but it does still appear to be there for what it's worth. That being said, if you're 10 points below median, you're probably out of luck. So yeah, cool. And yeah, someone asked, they have LORs in the cycle, should you get new recs or just use the same one? You can use the same ones. The content of your letter of rec doesn't matter. If you want to rewrite your statements, but letters of rec you can reuse. And they'll stay in your LSAC account, so you don't even have to do anything. Okay, so yeah, here's a rough schedule about what to do. This is very straightforward, but it is good to do. So first off, undergrad, get your best GPA. If you're still in undergrad, put your grades above everything. I mean, not like your health and whatnot, but in terms of the rest of the stuff, don't focus on your LSAT if you're not getting a 4.0. Which I know sounds harsh, but like it really does matter. And that will never be, you'll never get a chance to do it over. I'm sure we have a lot of people in here who would wish they took undergrad a little bit more seriously when they were there. And once you're done, you're done. There's no going back. Whereas with the LSAT, with all this will all be waiting for you. This is going nowhere. So if you are there, get good grades. Next, the LSAT, get your highest LSAT. It really is the biggest thing you can do for admissions. I'm not gonna say the rest of it doesn't matter, but these first 2 are like 90% of the equation. Like this is what moves the needle. And yes, the rest matters, just not nearly as much. After that, you want to get your application components in order. So your personal statement, your diversity statement. There are checklists of this out there. If you want, you can screenshot. This will also be recorded, so you can reference back to it on YouTube if you'd like. But basically, you want to do your letters of rec first and then start working on the rest of the things. Then you want to apply, which is ideally going to be in September. Will give you the best offers. Generally, it's not a big deal as the cycle goes on. So like October, you'll be fine. Still good offers. November starts to get a little worse. December also starts to get worse. But then by the time you get to January, February, April, it starts to really get bad because you're behind all these people that have applied before you, which one, the schools are giving out seats easier because they have more seats to give out. And then 2, you look like someone who's not on top of your stuff because now you're applying later in the cycle. Not to say it can't work out, but generally I want you guys applying earlier in the cycle because it just makes it easier. After you have your offers, which will come in, I guess the range on this, you can hear back as early as September. For example, ASU is known to do this where they will snap up the best candidates as fast as possible, like Arizona State, I should say. But like, so if you apply on September 1st and Arizona State likes you, you might hear back on September 5th. So it's worth noting that like they're going to snap you up. Some schools might not let you know until May or like April. So like it can take a while, but kind of once it's April, May, then you can start negotiating and say like, hey, this school gave me a full ride. I want to attend your school, but this school gave me all the tuition off. And that's really hard to resist. And then you can just say like, what can you do for me? Can you help make this easier? You don't even have to directly ask for more money. You can just ask like, I have this dilemma. Can you help me? And often they'll just email you back and be like, yeah, sure, we'll match their offer. Sometimes they won't negotiate, but you can legitimately send like a $200,000 email just by asking. So I'd recommend asking. The worst they can say is no. And some schools, and this kind of gets to the BS of law school admissions, where they're like saying, like, oh, we don't know negotiate scholarship, or you don't want to piss them off. They're not going to take your offer back for asking. The worst they can say is no, this is our best offer, at which point you then evaluate it and say, okay, is this an offer I'm willing to take? But they can also just come back and say, oh, you know what? We will give you a discount, because why not? They do it all the time. So you should always ask for more. Doesn't mean you'll get more, but like if you send an email and they even just give you $10,000 more a year, like that's $30,000. So I don't know, I would send an email. Like maybe, yeah, it's a little socially awkward, but it's a ton of money. And then once you have all those offers, once you've negotiated, then you decide what makes the most sense for you. Like we talked about earlier, if you're really looking at making the money, and that's in the book, I talk about like what the schools are that can get you into like different reasons to go, what schools you should look at, then you should look at those schools. But if you just want a GAD, probably go for like where geographically makes sense as well as where's cheap. So yeah, cool. All right, well, let me get to the chat real quick to break some things down, because I try not to be too ADHD with the chat or else I'll just get totally distracted, but I will check in on it every once in a while. Yeah, so if you've been out of undergrad for a while, what would the options be? One, like you can email professors. It's part of their job. Most professors don't remember very many people. In fact, I'd be surprised if I went back to my undergrad professors if more than like one or two of them even remembered who I was. I know one of them would, but beyond that, I don't think they would. So like they're used to not remembering you. You can just say, hey, I took your class. I found it really meaningful. I enjoyed it. I got an A. I'm now applying to law school. Would you be willing to help write me a letter of rec? And many of them will. You can also offer to attach your personal statement resume, so they kind of know what you're up to. Sometimes you don't want to do that because then they can end up sounding like a parrot of your personal statement, which isn't great. But there's nothing wrong with reaching out to them. You can also ask your boss or direct supervisor at work to get letters of rec. So yeah. And then alternatively, if you are in a weird position, like for example, I don't have a boss because I do online internet weird things. I could like ask clients because like, they're kind of your boss in a way where it's like you work for them. So they can, write your letter. But generally, professors, then your boss. And then if you're doing contract stuff, I'd probably try to avoid asking clients, but you could. It just gets a little dicier. And yeah, what do I recommend for students studying in large public universities? Yeah, so I went to a large public university. I went to the University of Colorado for reference. But you can just ask, like, even if you're at these schools, it's still part of their job. So professors will still be willing to do it. Even if you were in a 400-person class, you can ask them. You can also ask a TA. There's nothing wrong with that. If a TA knows you well, it's a lot more about what they say than who says it. So if someone who like doesn't have a fancy degree is still willing to vouch for you, that will still go a long way. The law schools don't care if it's like the fanciest professor, if it's some random TA, they care what that person says and what they say about you. So yeah. And then yeah, what schools offer hybrid programs? I mean, I'm not super deep in that, but right off the top of my head, Syracuse, Santa Clara, same areas, I think. It's still pretty rare, the in-person / remote programs, but they are getting there. But there are like resources on that. And yeah, can schools see the other offers? No, that's all private. So what you choose to share with them is up to you. I think sharing offers is valid. You don't want to lie to them because that's kind of gross. But if you can say, like, for example, I was helping someone last week or like 2 weeks ago, where she got into UT and got scholarship, but not as much as she wanted. And then she got into the University of Florida, which is a little bit lower ranked, but still a good school, like 20 something, and UT is like 16, I think. And so she said, hey, Florida gave me a full ride. Like, what can you do? And she's telling the truth there. It is a natural competitor to Texas. And maybe they come back and say, hey, like, we want her. If we don't match this offer, or at least give her more incentive, she's gonna go to Florida. Let's give her some more money. It doesn't always work. Like sometimes it doesn't work. I want to be transparent. Some schools really won't help you out, but so many will. So you really should ask. Okie dokie. What else do we have? Okay. We're gonna skip this. This is about index numbers. Yeah, I've already hammered home the point about why they care about your numbers so much, but basically it's worth noting when you apply to law school, they put your numbers into a calculation which only considers your LSAT and GPA, and it ranks you in their system. Not every single school does this, but I think about 95% of them do. So if you have really bad numbers, the rest of this won't even matter. They're never even reading your application at a certain point. You have to at least get in the door. So that's why your LSAT and GPA really do matter, is because if you have a low enough LSAT and a low enough GPA, this calculation will sort you as someone that they don't care about, and they won't even read your personal statement. So, can you overcome slight deficiencies? Sure. If you're at a 155, like 3.2 applying to Harvard, they're not even reading the first part of your application. Like they just do not care. You're not getting in. So yeah. But we don't spend too much time on that because we've already gone 25 minutes longer than or not longer, but let's keep moving. All right, so first off, personal statements. That's what we're going to focus primarily on. So when you're writing a personal statement, what do you think the goal is? And for those of you that aren't shy, if you don't mind sending them in the chat, I'd be curious to see a few ideas of what people are thinking. All right, yeah. So there's a fair amount, some of which are good. Kind of the standard answer you get is like why you want to go to law school, which I don't think tends to make the most powerful personal statement because you got to remember what the school's incentives are. I mean, they do care that you want to go to law school, but what they really care about is them. They're very self-obsessed. They want to create the best class for them. So Stephanie said something good, which is like kind of the very typical what I say. So I don't know if you've been here before, if you're just good at like reading minds. But it's primarily why the school needs you. Like, why are you going to be a kick-ass lawyer? Now, that can have secondarily why you want to be a lawyer. But if anything, that's going to be secondary supporting this idea of why you are going to be a kick-ass lawyer out there law school or a kick-ass law student and then become a kick-ass lawyer. Because honestly, a lot of people want to be lawyers. So that doesn't make people good law students. The desire, it doesn't hurt, but it doesn't necessarily help either. So yeah, I'll look through the other ones real quick. Who you are, you definitely want to keep who you are out of a personal statement. That belongs in the diversity statement. If you start talking about like your ethnic identity or like, LGBT stuff or like your siblings in a personal statement, that's bad. It's not that it's bad. It doesn't hurt you. It's a waste of space. The goal here is to convince them you're a kick-ass person. And if you start talking about this stuff that doesn't really contribute to that, it's just more about who you are. That's all great. It can go in a diversity statement, but it shouldn't go in a personal statement. Yeah, so fun stuff. Okay, cool. And it's a decent amount. Okay, cool. Do law schools consider if you want their for undergrad? Some do, not really. It's not a big deal. So yeah, it's a decent variation, but this is an art, not a science. It's not to say that the other ones aren't bad, but the important thing is, remember, you're in a stack of applications, hundreds. And when they read them, they're trying to differentiate who stands out as kind of like a kick-ass person. I guess if you have like really good numbers, it doesn't matter because they're just trying to make sure you're not a psycho that talks about like your hobby of like running over animals on the side of the road, because that'll keep you out. But if you have like really good numbers at an average school, they're not going to care if you have a bad personal statement too much. Like assuming you can use proper grammar and don't say psycho stuff. However, if you are more average or if you need your numbers to compensate for you, you're going to need to advocate like why you're going to be an awesome applicant. So that gets into like why the school needs you. So my favorite way of doing this is a story of success. So talking about like how you kind of kicked ass in the past. And there's a lot of ways you can do this. So for example, it could be like awesome work project or like kind of a narrative of like what you've done throughout your life that shows you kind of like on this path. Like, for example, if you had done like a lot of like community activism and then you like interned in Congress or something like that, that's all great because it kind of like paints this cohesive narrative. It can also be more granular, like talking about how you just like optimize some system at your job, and it can be small. My example I always use is like if you were a cook at Chipotle, but you came up with a more efficient way to cook the chicken. It seems small, but it really is a story of you seeing a problem and fixing it. And that's the kind of stuff that lawyers do. Bad personal statements. And like, we'll go into the ones that are like very common. The big one is complaining / trauma dumping. This is, they hate these when you just come off as someone who's like, you're not talking about, I mean, it's one thing when the, like, if you identify a problem and it's like, here's what I'm doing to change it, that's awesome because you're still talking about you and what you're doing. But if you're just complaining or just saying like, oh, here's what happened when I was a freshman in college, it just comes off as like, okay, that sucks, but like, why are you a lawyer? Like for example, if someone did go through some traumatic event, that's horrible and we all feel like empathy for them, but that doesn't qualify you to be a lawyer. So you have to be very like intentional, like what message am I conveying here? And if your message is like, I don't know, like someone hit and run my car, it's like, okay, that sucks, but like, so like, does that make you a lawyer? That seems kind of irrelevant. So you got to be careful with that. And a lot of these complaining and trauma dumping, it's not that it's like, I mean, complaining is bad. But the trauma dumping, it's more about, it often becomes just about talking about the trauma rather than your response. The trauma essay can be done. Generally, I would say avoid it. But if you are going to do it, it has to focus on what you've done to kind of overcome whatever negative things you've had in your life. Already, cool. Yeah, real quick, we'll go through the chat, which, okay, what do we have? How long is the average one? Most schools ask for 2 pages double spaced, so that's shorter than you would think. You don't have a lot of space to waste. And then additionally, I think Berkeley takes a 4-page one. I haven't had someone apply to Berkeley in a while, though. I don't know why, because no one wants to go to Berkeley. But you can usually modify it to 4 pages if you need to, just add in a bunch of stuff, which is nice, because usually it's hard to get it down to 2 pages. Like the challenge is not getting to 2, it's keeping it to 2. And then it's a difficult question, all relative, but what are the ranges I consider to be good numbers for LSAT GPA? Yeah, so like you said, it's all relative. It depends on your schools. I'd say if you're looking at the best schools in the world, like 173 plus and like a 4.0, obviously that's overkill for many schools. If you're trying to apply to like an average school, anywhere in the 160s and like a 3.5 will get it done. If you're just trying to get into like the bottom tier schools and like, just get into law school at a decent price, high 150s plus like really any GPA. So it really depends on goals, but that's like the rough outline. So like obviously high 150s, any GPA, very different from 173, 4.0. That depends on your outcome and like what you want, like what kind of school you want to attend. Okay, cool. Well, let's keep chugging. See your personal statement. Well, it was kind of like, opining about how this stuff doesn't matter, or at least not as much as your GPA. Your personal statement is kind of the biggest thing other than your numbers, because this is their chance to see who you are and what judgment you show in terms of what you put out there. So it is a chance to leave that impression. That being said, there's a lot of things that you can do in it, and it's your one chance to show them why they want you. Remember, the admissions officer is making one decision, which is, do they want you at their school? They don't really care about you. In fact, they don't care at all about you because they have so many of these applications in front of them. You want to align your incentives with them and make it so that they want you, because they know that you want them. That's a given. So yeah, you want to, make sure that you are approaching it the right way. So don't gush about the school. You don't need to. Don't gush about the law. People often do that as well, where they talk about justice and like that. And that can be done in an okay way. If you, went, like, for example, if you lived in an authoritarian country and then you came to the US and you really appreciate the justice system, maybe that's good. If you've lived your whole life and you're just talking about justice, I don't know, maybe not so much. You also don't want to talk about like reform that much as a general rule, because, lawyers don't really do reform, at least those working in law. Like, yeah, legislators do, but if you're going to law school because you want to like change the criminal justice system, I don't know. I might look elsewhere. I think you can do a lot more without a JD than you can with, especially if you want to go make money. Because if you want to make money, you are not changing anything. You are going to work for like some big firm and becoming part of the system, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Just don't have any delusions about making 300K and reforming the criminal justice system. That ain't happening. So yeah. Cool. And yeah, if you're sitting above a 3.5, if you're not above 3.5, would it be a waste to even apply? No, I don't think so. Just, you want to be very aware of the schools you're going to get into, which are, I mean, it depends, because like 3.4 is very different from like 2.5. So it really depends on your situation. And then also, like, are you only content going to the biggest firms and working and making a ton of money? If that's the case, I mean, yeah, I might reconsider. Like, if you're trying to make money in law, like your whole goal in going to law school is like you want to make a ton of money and your GPA is kind of low, I'd probably look elsewhere. I might go get like an MBA because it's going to be hard to get those high paying jobs with a lower GPA. Obviously, you get a do-over in law school, but the kind of schools you're going to be at are going to be schools where you have to really crush it to get those big offers. And I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. I just think it's important to stay realistic. So yeah. All right. Here's writing advice from Orwell. I think we're all familiar with Orwell. He wrote 1984. He wrote Animal Farm, all that fun stuff. And Orwell's a good writer because he doesn't get cutesy with his writing, and a lot of people do. So one thing is we want to make our writing very clear and smooth. Use smaller words. The lower like writing level in terms of grade level your writing is out, the better. If you put it into like a grade level checker and it says 3rd grade level, that's a win. You want people to be able to read your writing. If it says like college sophomore, that's a problem. That means you're using too much jargon. It means you're being too technical. You're getting too cutesy. So you want to keep it simple. Don't use metaphors, similes, etc. Always use short words when possible. My favorite pet peeve word is the word utilize. I hate it. I cannot stand it. Whenever I see someone use this word, I judge them. And it's because there's no reason for it. The word use has the exact same meaning, but it's like under half the length. So never use utilize, always use. And there are other words like that. Basically, whenever possible, keep it simple. You're not trying to be a poet. You're trying to be a lawyer, and lawyers try to communicate things as clearly as possible. Additionally, if it's possible to cut something, cut it. A lot of editing is just cutting. Like, I mean, I edit my writing a ton, not my emails or whatnot, but like when I like this book is like, I have a lot of editing to do. If you can see Grammarly is cutting me up right now. And that's good because like I've made mistakes. That just happens. Like that is going to happen as you write. And it's your job to go in and like actually address what's going on, which as a total aside, but if you don't have Grammarly, you should all get it. It's very good. And it will, like you all have things, I have things that we do that Grammarly will like cut out of you. Additionally, don't use passive voice. This is very standard. A lot of people do it. It's where instead of being the subject of a sentence or being the direct object, it just makes you look weaker and it makes your writing less powerful, which we don't want. So once again, Grammarly, it'll catch that. You don't need to pay someone to edit for you. Grammarly will catch all this. And then, yeah, don't use jargon, don't use foreign phrases. There are exceptions to this. If you're telling a story about like your diversity and it has like some word in a different language, that's great. If you're just like using like, I'm trying to think of an example, like touche or I don't know. If a word's not common, don't write it in a document. Like you don't want to like get cutesy. That's not your job. Okay, cool. And yeah, I've gone way too long elaborating today, so sorry about that. But do's and don'ts person statements first. We're telling the story of success. We're using a lot of I senses, and we're showing we're not telling. For example, we're not going to say I am resilient. We're going to tell the story of like how you didn't give up, like calling someone over and over that you needed for a project to get done until they picked up the phone. So like we don't want conclusions, we want stories so that our reader gets to that conclusion on their own. And yeah, things to avoid. Pity parties. We don't want pity parties. Not that you can't feel bad for you. I'll feel bad for you. If you want to like dump about stuff, you can email me. Don't do it in your law school applications, it won't help you. Also don't talk about what's happened to you rather than what you've done. That gets into the trauma stuff. If like your house burned down, that sucks. If you're going to talk about it, you better be focusing on how you went through the insurance process or how you rebuilt. You don't want to just talk about the fire and how traumatic it was. I believe you. I'm sure that's terrible, but it doesn't help you get in. And then also don't get cute with your writing. People love to do that, but it just does not help. Okay, well, that's a lot of me talking. Let's do a few examples. I only have one that was sent to me from this group. So we'll start there. I think that person knows who they are. I'm just going to edit it real quick to remove your personal information. But yeah, exactly. Like you want your personal statement to make you look like a winner. And there are many ways to do that. Like there's not only one way to do this, but there are many ways to avoid it. And so for the person that sent it in, thank you. It's always appreciated because it is a lot to get your stuff publicly critiqued. But it is useful. And everything I say comes from a place of love. Everyone has an awesome statement in them. It just is a matter of finding it and emphasizing what's good. But yeah, this one, just from a first glance, it's double spaced, which is nice. It's not too long. Hard to know exactly what it is, but let's dive in and just kind of talk through it. So first things first, you don't want a title. They don't like that. So you can just have it like person statement. That's fine. But is it not working? There we go. See, I would cut that. Cut person statement. You'll have a header, but you can see a template for that online. Just Google like person statement header and you'll see what they do. Fairly straightforward stuff. Alrighty, let's dive in. So here they say, on my 10th birthday, my parents revealed a secret that would forever alter my perspective. Let's pause there. So at this point, what do we know about our writer? I'm like, well, I know they're 10 and I know they're getting some like truth bomb dropped on them. I tend to want to get to the point very quickly in mine, just so that we don't, I mean, we'll have to see. We're 1/10 cents. I don't want to be too harsh, but I think leading with stuff like very quickly so that if our reader gets interrupted by a phone call or a colleague, they immediately know that you're winning is good. I might be a little aggressive on that, but I think immediately getting into winning is good. And like, yeah, you got something dropped on you, but we don't know what it is. At this point, I don't know anything about you. I just know that you got a surprise once, which, okay, sure. It could work because like, you know, there are multiple ways to do this, but generally I want to get into the winning right away. I think a really powerful sentence to start is I am like blank. And then that can be like, I am a litigation paralegal. And then you go into all the details. But I am statements are very powerful. It's not universal. I'm not gonna say that's the only way to do LSAT prep. Sorry, not LSAT prep, admissions. But if you're unsure of where to start, that's a great place to start. All right, let's continue. They disclosed the heartbreaking news that I had another older sister that passed away during childbirth. I'm like, okay, that's really sad. That's pretty brutal. I don't terribly see how that's relevant to you being a law student though. Like that's sad, but I don't know. We'll see where this goes. They continue. Her umbilical cord strangled her to death and the doctors were unable to save her. This death traumatized my parents. had a profound effect on my mindset and left me grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. My thoughts were centered on, and I don't think we want about something called, I could be wrong about that because I don't have Grammarly to tell me for sure, but that doesn't feel right. I think we don't have punctuation there. But okay, my thoughts were centered on the older sister I was never able to meet, the trauma my family was enduring, and the possibility of not even existing. Okay, so far we're one paragraph in. I think it's always worth just pausing after a paragraph to think about like what have we conveyed. And real quick, so what do we know? And after paragraph 1, I would say our author lost their sister that she didn't even know about, and that's sad. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with that, but this is your one chance to show them that you are like gonna be a kick-ass lawyer, and this doesn't hurt your case, but it doesn't help it either, and we've used a decent chunk of our space. So nothing about this is going to hurt your admissions chances, but this is your chance to like affirmatively push yourself forward, and this just isn't doing that yet. It's very possible we could get into that because I haven't read the rest of this, but you know, we want to get into the winning pretty quickly, and I don't know that this does it. If anything, I would push this more to a diversity statement because it's more about like who you are, where you come from. But even then, we want to talk about how that affected you rather than what happened. Like all the details can be like you can kind of like, I mean, you can definitely cut the exact details of how she died. And then the rest of this is all up for debate as well. But yeah, and for what it's worth, like the writing's pretty clean. You're not making like big mistakes. But overall, I do think I'd probably go in a different direction. But let's see what else we've got. All right, we continue. My parents' sacrifices were crucial to my character development, along with profoundly shaping my values and aspirations. So that's not bad, but it's about your parents. Once again, it's still not about you. We know hardly anything about our author at this point, which it's a personal statement. You want it to be personal. Like this is your chance to brag and be kind of, I don't want to say obnoxious, but like really advocate for yourself. Which, you know, some people can have trouble with because it feels weird, but your job here is to advocate and point out why you're going to be an awesome lawyer. All right, we continue. Despite enduring pain and adversity, my father, a plumber with over a decade of experience, persevered through injuries, including a broken collarbone and back, along with several high-risk surgeries. He still works with a curved spinal cord, which causes constant chronic pain and limits his mobility. So, I mean, if we're writing a personal statement for your dad, those could all be good details, but it's just not for you. And we really want to focus in on you and what you've done. I guarantee you have stuff. But we still don't know anything about you. At this point, all we know is that like you really admire your family, which is awesome. And that you had the sister who passed away, but nothing about this screams future lawyer. It's just like, it doesn't scream not future lawyer either. Like I want to caveat that as well. Like nothing about this is going to keep you out, but this isn't going to help you. And our whole job is like push ourselves over the finish line. But let's read on. My mother quit her job, leaving behind a pension plan to prioritize our family's well-being. Most importantly, my mom gave me the world after experiencing a tremendous amount of trauma with her previous pregnancy. Their sacrifices instilled a deep sense of gratitude and drive to make the most of the opportunities afforded me. So once again, we're saying you're grateful, which like not bad. It's just, you know, we don't need that. Through them, I developed a desire to help improve the lives of others and participate in leadership roles to make a positive difference in the world through studying law. Okay, so this feels better. I don't like that this is conclusive. Here, this is what I mean by telling rather than showing. We're saying, and I don't use my pages very much, which is Apple's terrible little like word thing, but how do I even use this? Sorry, I'm trying to like change the colors to make it clear. So like this is all very conclusive. We're not giving evidence for this desire to help others. We're just saying it's true. So I believe you. And because I believe you, I think you should go in and like pull out where you have done these leadership roles. Let's talk about those roles. Like, what are they? What did you do in them? I guarantee you have great stories in there. And if you actually tell those stories, that can be it. And yeah, for the personalized essay, we can use I. Yeah, you can. I mean, you can use I in all essays. I don't know why high school English teachers tell you can't use I. As a general rule, they're not very good at writing. I'm not to dunk on high school English teachers, but I can be powerful when used appropriately. I mean, you want to stick to facts, but you can say like, I argue that. And like, I mean, I was a poli-sci major as one of my majors, for what it's worth. But I use I in my essays all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you don't want to say like, I think X because it makes you look weak, but if you can say like, I argue blank, totally valid. So yeah. And in fact, you should be using the word I. Like you should probably have the word I like 20 to 30 times in your, okay, maybe that's high, but you want a lot of I's, like at least 5 or 10 in your essay. Okay, but we have good stuff here. So like for the person that submitted this, first off, thank you. I know it's very like vulnerable to put this stuff out there, or at least it would have been for me. But you have good stuff. So let's see what else we get into. All right, we continue. For a period of time, my knowledge of the law was limited. However, over time, my knowledge expanded and I began to learn the powerful impact lawyer can have. All right, same issue. Good stuff. However, let's show that. Let's show how you're learning the law. Maybe what positions are you doing? What experiences are you doing? Because if we can show that, it's going to be a lot more powerful than just saying it. Like show yourself, like learning cases, or did you work at a paralegal system, or like do something. Like, yeah, I just scanned down legal assistant. I guarantee you have stories in there. So if we could focus on that, it's going to be really powerful. Well, let's continue. My journey towards a career in law became realistic during my sophomore year of college when I was offered a position as a legal assistant at a personal injury law firm. Yeah, so like you could just start with that. You don't need to like talk about how you got the job. Just say like, I worked as a personal injury legal assistant. And then there's so much there. I'm sure you did all sorts of weird stuff. Go into those details because that's where the like gold will be. But where they're like, wow, this person really was like, she took action, got this job, and here's what she did. We need her at our law school because like this can make an awesome statement. But here's the thing, it took us half the statement to get there. So at this point, they may have already ignored you because they're not reading all of these cover to cover. I know they act like they are, but I guarantee you, if they're like a paragraph in and they're like, this person has no potential, they might not even make it to the gold. And that being said, I know this person very much, this might be like a very first draft. And there's a lot of good stuff here. The writing's not bad. But yeah, I would lean into this legal assistant story. And it's not your only story, but this is a good story that you could do. All right, but let's continue. Immersed in the complexities of the legal field, I gained invaluable practical experience and insight into the profound impact that skilled legal representation can have on an individual's life. Once again, we're telling rather than showing. Can we tell the story about when you impacted someone and helped them out? You can go into one story and say, like, here's Mary, and here's how I helped her crush it in her like case, and I helped her get a settlement from this terrible company, whatever. If you can tell that and show the real impact that it helped and it like kept her from like having to sell like her grandmother's ring or something silly. Like it sounds artsy and kind of nonsense, but like that stuff is good in support of the broader idea that you're someone that kicks ass. So you can go into like these artsy kind of stories that people like. You just have to do it in support of the right idea. But yeah, I would go into more detail instead of saying this very broad thing. Let's show it. Working closely with experienced attorneys, I witnessed firsthand the power of advocacy. Same issue. We're telling rather than showing. As a legal assistant, I eagerly embraced every opportunity to expand my knowledge and skills, from conducting legal research, drafting documents, or assisting with client consultations. I think that's and just because we did all these things. I don't know. I could be wrong with the grammar. I'm so reliant on Grammarly to find these things for me. I really promise, like all of you need to get it. It's the best $10 you'll spend a month. It'll make your writing so much better. Even if you just use it for your applications, you really should. But once again, can we show yourself expanding your knowledge and skills? What if you had to learn a whole new area of law for a certain case? Show yourself doing that. What if you had to conduct legal research for that case? Talk about that. A consultation. Did you ever like meet with a client and like really have that conversation with them? Like all these little stories, I guess they don't tell the whole picture, but the more details about a little story then allows the reader to understand that you do this for like all the clients. So I really would dive into a more specific story. But we continue. This hands-on experience deepened my understanding of legal processes and reinforced my commitment to making a positive difference. Same issue, we can show that rather than tell it. In addition to the practical skills acquired, I was also exposed to the ethical responsibilities inherent in the practice of law. I would just cut that unless we go in a direction about ethics, but we're kind of out of space. So I would just. All right. Overall, this invaluable experience solidified my determination to pursue a career and fueled my passion to advocate for justice. Yeah, once again, show, don't tell. I feel that's kind of the big message on this one. My experience as a legal assistant provided invaluable insight, skills, and inspiration that continue to lead me on towards achieving my goals. Additionally, guided by the lessons learned from my parents' sacrifices, I am committed to leveraging my legal education to advocate for justice and have a meaningful impact on the lives of others. Okay. Yeah, at this point, like my verdict, not to be harsh, but I would just say, like, you have good stuff here. You have stories you can really tell. I would dive into the stories about being a legal assistant. Like you could pick one case or pick two. I would probably cut the stuff about your family. If anything, you can bump it to a diversity statement. But even that, it's not terribly diverse because it's like, I think many of us admire our parents. And my general rule for a diversity statement is if more than a few people coming into the application pool can say it, it's probably not diverse enough. So you want to be careful, like, is this truly unique? And like admiring your parents, I'm not saying it's not important, but it's not terribly unique. I'm sure many of us here admire our parents. Some of us probably don't, and that's okay too. But yeah, I would just dive into these stories. Like I guarantee you have good stuff there. If you're curious about, like, if you want us to follow up, I always am happy to just take a quick look for free. I do in-depth edits as well, which I charge for, but I'm always happy to give like kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down, just by taking a glance. But yeah, cool. Thank you for submitting that. Hopefully this was insightful to kind of like have the exact examples. But yeah, let's pop over to the chat, which is, yeah, they could relate their personal injury to their father's injury and how much they wanted to help people like their dad and tell a story. Yeah, I mean, you could do that. I think if you're going to keep your parental stuff, you have to tie it into kind of like one central narrative. So like what Jess said, if you do want to keep your parent stuff, it is that. However, like if you were going to go in kind of the direction Jess goes, talking about your parents, like you got to keep the like exposition on your parents to maybe like 1 to 3 sentences. Like it has to be really short. Here it was almost the whole first page. You're going to have to keep it like that. And even that I don't like. I would still want to lead with like let's say we were going to rewrite that in that idea, I would say I am, or I worked as a personal injury legal assistant. And obviously this is just like banging things out. You can make it sound better than this. And then like 2 to 3 sentences about your father and how he suffered injuries slash that drove you. I don't know. And if it's not true, don't write it. But and then you can talk about actual cases. So that's a rough idea. All right, cool. And I did get another. So for that person, I will quickly edit it up real quick to make sure it's anonymous. And then we'll dive in. And as always, I really do appreciate those of you that send in because I know it's very vulnerable. I try to be nice. I think if anything, I probably lean on the side of cynicism, which is good for the law school system because there's a lot of BS. But also, I don't know. You want to like, keep it reasonable because you don't want to say like this is terrible, like cut it all, you're so dumb. Because like that's not true. No one is. It's just this is a very hard process and it's tricky. Yeah, how many pages? Roughly 2. Many keep it explicitly 2, in which case, if they tell you 2 pages, do not write 1.9, do not write 2.1, write 2. They hate it if you don't follow directions. So, yeah, every school will be different. You can do that all through LSAC's site, which is annoying, but yeah. Hold on, I'm trying to open this one up, but it's being weird. Ooh, it's all in italics too. All right, well, for this person, I appreciate that you have your name cut out, so I don't have to edit it. So thank you for sending it over. Let's get the screen shared and format things real quick. Alrighty, cool. So yeah, let's dive in and see what we have. For what's worth, totally fresh. I've never seen this before. So why do I want to go to law school? I don't like that because everyone applying to law school can say that. As a general rule, if everyone can say what you say in your personal statement, it does not belong there. You need to keep it to kind of, it's personal. It's about you. And everyone wants to go to law school who's applying to law school. So I would just dive right in. We don't have to start with like a rhetorical question. But okay, sure, we continue. To answer this, we're going to need to go back to one distinctive career day at my elementary school. I would just cut right to career day. You don't have to like do a lead in. You could just start there. As a general rule, I don't like talking about when you're a little kid because I think then the admissions officer will picture you as a little kid rather than as a professional adult that will make a kick-ass lawyer. I'm not gonna say universally never do it, but as a general rule, I would err against it. But also I would cut like straight to elementary school. If you are gonna do this kind of open, like cut to career day and do like a cold open. You don't need to like lead into it. All right, let's continue. I was born and raised in a single parent household on the urban streets of Augusta, Georgia. Okay, that feels more diversity statement because like once again, this is all relevant information about you, but not whether or not you're going to kick ass. This is more about like the perspective you bring. And that's kind of the split, which I'm going to actually write this out real quick. This is a very important thing that I find folks don't always get, but we have a very big split between your personal statement and your diversity statement. And I can't see what I'm typing because my thing's in the way. Oh, I actually spelled those right. Fantastic. Personal statements are why you will kick ass. And then diversity statements are kind of who you are / what you bring. So you'll kind of, whenever you're bringing in this stuff, you kind of think about like, where does this fit? Is this more diversity or is this more personal? And, your background tends to go more diversity. So I would say like, stuff about your family, that goes to diversity. It can be in your application. It's just about where you put it. So not bad information, just think about like where you're putting it in your overall package. So I wouldn't cut, but I would move it. But let's keep reading. My mother typically worked odd jobs here and there, and it wasn't uncommon to not know where the next paycheck would come from. All fine, just diversity. All this pressure manifested itself in me as an excessive amount of uninhibited energy. I might show that rather than just say it. So same thing that we were talking about with that last one. maybe talk about like you, because of this, like you were stressed out and you like struggled in school. Not that this is true. I'm just trying to think about what uninhibited energy was like. Were you a little wild? Like, did you do crazy stuff? I don't know, but showing it will drive the point home a little bit, more effectively. Let's see what else. I took every opportunity to improve my education and find my career. So now we're jumping from like childhood to educational stuff. Where now I'm picturing you as like a young adult, maybe like college or freshly out of undergrad. So it's kind of a big jump. We start with career day. We never really dive into career day. We just kind of say that. So I would try to make a more cohesive narrative. There's just a lot going along here. Oh, and now we're back to career day. Yeah, career day was no exception either. An exception to what? I don't understand what that's referring to. So I would rephrase that. But let's continue. Oh, I guess you're saying that you were like bouncing around at career day too. You weren't like, I don't know. If it's not clearly understandable, the first read through probably means you want to rephrase it. But either way, my message so far on this one would be like, let's pick a cohesive narrative and kind of like go with that. I feel like there's a lot going on here. And it's not that it's bad, it's just that we're going in like many different directions. We really want to be focused and narrow. All right, let's continue. However, one career day stood out to me. On this career day, a gentleman named John Donne introduced himself and his occupation as a lawyer. I remember every detail, his unwavering presence, the speech, the projection. All right, the knowledge that lawyers provide their expertise into important decisions that affect us every day. I was in complete amazement that day. Intrigued with the idea of what could be, I decided that I would do whatever it took to earn a place among these individuals. So like, I guess my hesitation here is we know that this is an elementary school and like, I don't know. Elementary school, like I guess it's fine to have this. You always wanted to be a lawyer, but people often don't fully understand the world in elementary school. So yeah, I don't know. Like my general inclination would be to steer away from any time that you're a little kid. You could make this work. However, if you were gonna stick with this direction, I would jump right into career day and like basically start here. Like you want to have a sense like lead in, like I've wanted to be a lawyer since elementary school, and then go into this story about John Donne. And then after that, you're going to go into all your winning. But even then, I would prefer to go straight into the winning. Though if you are going to do this kind of like career day style, you want to get right into it. You can like cut all this, move some of it to a diversity statement, and then like kind of cut the rest. All right, let's keep chugging now. With the goal of earning a law degree, I successfully gained entry into Armstrong Atlantic State University, which is currently Georgia Southern. This was no simple achievement. I was first in the family to attend a university with no connections to the legal profession. I was left lost as to what was involved in the career I was pursuing. I think that's a comma splice. I don't think that's correct. I think those are two different sentences. So Grammarly will catch that for you. I should get like sponsored. Like I swear, most of my editing stuff is just like get Grammarly. It'll catch all these little things and make your writing so much better. And you guys saw my ebook. You saw how many things were underlined. No one's done. Like I rate a lot, and Grammarly catches all sorts of stuff. The amount of editing you need to do, even as a really good writer, and I don't consider myself a good writer. I'm an okay writer, but there's a lot to do. So really make sure that you have it in your back pocket. It will catch these things. So okay, sure, you're going to undergrad. Generally, I wouldn't talk about undergrad because out of the 50 people in this call, you know what's common about every single one of us? All of us either have a bachelor's degree or are in progress to do one, which just means it's not powerful in your application. Because if everyone can say it, it doesn't have as much value because it's like, everyone can say it. So it is worth considering that. If everyone can say it, I wouldn't spend a lot of time on it because your whole goal here is to differentiate, and it's just not differentiating. I mean, you could go into like what you did at the university, but I would probably cut about just knowing. If you do want to talk about being like first gen undergrad, you could spin that into like coming from kind of like where you came from with your mom and her being a single mom and doing kind of odd jobs. You could tie it in there, cover it in a personal statement about why you'll kick ass. Probably don't want to talk about something that literally everyone else has done. You would want to keep that to your diversity statement about kind of like where you come from and what you bring. I'm not saying it's bad, just misplaced. All right, let's continue. Where were we? I was left lost as to what was involved in the career I was pursuing. Sure, I wouldn't mention that though. Some things don't need to be said because it's not that it's winning. Like this just doesn't help you. If anything, it just makes you look like you're not sure what you're doing, which don't get me wrong. When I was like pre-law, I didn't know what I was doing either. But you just don't want to say that because it makes you look as if you don't know what you're like getting into. And we just don't want to introduce those kind of doubts. We want to have everything only interpretable as a positive. And this could be interpreted as a negative. So we just want to, when in doubt, leave it out. Alrighty. I've learned to make opportunities for myself, even though they aren't always presented to me. Yeah, I would give examples of that, like where you found an opportunity or a job or something. And then generally saying they aren't presented to you, that's probably true. but people can view that as complaining. And if anything can ever be interpreted as complaining, my general inclination is just to stay away from it. Not that it is, but you say a couple of phrases like this, and the next thing you know, you've given the impression as someone who complains. And I'm not saying that's what it is, because this is one case and it's not even that bad, but it can leave that taste. And we just want to avoid anything that can even be interpreted that way. Because you just don't know how people will react. Some will take it well, some will not. So I err on the side of caution. All right, we continue. There were so many organizations that were available at the university, but there wasn't much of a variety for the law profession. I would cut that. Therefore, I eagerly participated in moot court as a great logical step. Yeah, you can just say I participate. You don't need like, this is what I mean in terms of like cutting words. Like you don't need it as a great next step. You can just say I was in moot court. And then go into the details on that, because that actually is a good thing to talk about if you did it well. Moot court at ASU, much like any other schools, is a public speaking competition. Right, we don't have to define moot court. I would just want to what you did. Like you don't need to say like what it is. To prepare, we develop legal arguments and practice our rhetorical skills. Like all this is given. People know what moot court is. You don't have to go into like every single detail. Also, is it called moot court in undergrad? I thought generally it's called mock trial. Moot court tends to be law school, I think. But I don't know. That's not it probably is moot court. I'm not doubting you. I'm just saying I've never heard that. It was always mock trial where I went to undergrad. And I've never heard moot court. I actually just partnered with a mock trial. A Canadian one for what's worth. So that's fine. Also, I should caveat, if you're Canadian, my advice is bad for admission. So a lot of this stuff won't be relevant to you, though most of us are Americans. So for what's worth. And some of it, like the writing stuff will all translate, but Canada wants very different statements for what's worth. So yeah, let's continue. Where were we? We're talking about the court. Oh, here we go. At first, the idea of speaking in front of an audience, even that of my peers, was tough. Any feelings of inadequacy were intensified by not knowing if my knowledge of the law was sufficient for formulating convincing arguments. Yeah, I would get to that quicker, because this is fine if you then overcome it and you talk about how you crushed it and now you're happy to talk in front of people. If you get to that crushing it, we can keep this. Over time, I slowly learned to trust my ability and my input was valuable. Generally, you can cut adverbs, you don't need them. So you just cut slowly and just say I learned. How's the same meaning? When competition season arrived, we went straight to work. There was legal research to be done and oral arguments to prepare, and I aim to do my best on all individual assignments. That's a past tense like agreement. This is in the past. You don't want to be saying you aimed, you aimed, which once again, you want to make sure you get that in one. I familiarized myself with what is going on in the courts and researched. So like once again, we gotta make sure we got the tenses right. Statutes that would strengthen my position. After weeks of intense research and practicing, I became knowledgeable with my arguments, the degrees of the case, and I was able to think on my feet. It was at this point, being in court felt natural. It was where I was meant to be. Yeah, so that's all fine. I don't think that's like a elite, like best personal statement ever, but I think talking about how like you did moot court and you crushed it, that can make a good statement. I would cut a lot of this stuff and get to moot court a lot quicker, but overall, it can work. I would try to go into detail about like an actual competition where you like had a, I don't know how it works. Like maybe you cross-examined a witness and like got them to like completely blow up, or you won some award. That can be good data to bring in and like evidence. But overall, this was a lot better. There's good stuff in there. All right, let's fly through the rest just out of the sake of time, because we have a lot to get through. So here we say the difference between knowing that a career is right for you and preparing for that career are completely different things. You can cut that. That doesn't add anything. This is about you. And like, yeah, careers are difficult, but we know that. We're all adults. Like, it's hard to do careers. Preparing for a law profession involves preparing for life and being able to take care of oneself. That's talking about law, it's not about you. You can cut that as well. It's commonplace in the profession. I hear about, okay, so that's a tough sentence, but we can rephrase that. I hear about is the need to hustle. Okay, maybe. I guess it depends where we go with that. I don't love it, but let's see what we do. Short-term gains are worth the sacrifice of one's physical, mental, and spiritual health. That feels like you're saying that. You could say like people often think. I don't know, like what's your take on that? While this is without a doubt admirable, I'm slowly learning that preparing for a successful law career will require a generous amount of discipline and adversity. Once again, this is talking about how law is hard, which like, yeah, it is. Law is not the easiest thing, but you don't need to tell the law school that. They know, they're the law school. We want to focus on you, not the future career. So I would lean a lot more into moot court or maybe other things you did. I practiced adversity throughout my years of undergrad and graduate school. So we're going to go back to my little colors that I did earlier, if I can figure that out. Same kind of deal, which is here we're telling rather than showing. Once again, like this isn't necessarily wrong, but let's show that adversity. Let's not just say it, because it's just not powerful. Just tell them that. During undergrad, my father was diagnosed with colon cancer and had to take a semester off. Well, so you need to add yourself as the antecedent there. I had to take a semester off to assist with his healthcare. So just make sure you get that. Even though my father succumbs to the disease, once again, past tense, I didn't allow this to deter me from pursuing my aspiration of law school. Okay, so yeah, I mean, you could talk about like the struggle of the semester. If you focus on like what you did, the sacrifices you made to help your dad, that can be good. It's a little odd to just drop in there very quickly, but it's not bad necessarily. I don't know, you want to have a cohesive narrative, and it feels like we're going from moot court and then talking about how law is like this hustle culture, and now we're talking about our dad and the adversity. So I would, all this is fine, I'd say, in isolation, but you probably want to pick like one or two ideas, kind of make one cohesive narrative. Remember, we only get 2 pages, and it's not a lot of space to have all different ideas. You kind of want to focus in on like one or two and kind of blend those two together. All right, let's continue. Through my hardships, I never wanted my hard work to go to waste. That's just an opinion. We can cut that. We can focus on what you did. So, which is here. After graduating from AAFU, I was prepared for my next step of applying and entering law school until my mother fell on financial hardships. Okay. That's probably true. I would probably cut it though. It's kind of tricky about, yeah. Because like, I don't know. It's like, I believe you. I'm always on your side. I have no reason to doubt you. Law schools doubt people when they say like, oh, here's why I didn't do it. So I don't know. I'll just be careful. And once again, we're going in a new direction, which is just a lot. Let's continue. At that moment, I had to be that support system for my mother during that time. So we have at that moment and during that time. Grammarly will catch that. They'll just say you don't need both of those. You can just say one or the other. Though I was maintaining a job, I was still yearning. I think that's yearning. To be in front of people and pursue my aspirations. In that moment, I decided to do whatever it takes to pursue my dream career. I enrolled into Capella University to obtain a master's degree in criminal justice. All right, cool. I was a bit rusty getting back in the swing of school, but became natural after my first semester. My master's provided me a full scope and detailed look into the operational process of police, courts, and corrections. In society today, these areas are what is causing uproars. I would say often causing uproars, because they're not all the uproars. There are many uproars about all sorts of things, and the need for dramatic changes. Being a part of that difference is what drives me each day to continue pursuing this dream. It was necessary to continue my education with this master's degree. Okay, sure, yeah, all that's fine. Once again, new direction. We're talking about taking time off because you're helping your mom, which is all good and admirable, but it's kind of a new direction. Then we start talking about your master's, which, all fine. But once again, new direction. We have a lot going on here, and I'll try to find a more kind of cohesive thing. We say the balance of working, taking care of my mother in school is extremely exhausting. I would just cut that. It's not bad, but some schools can be like, law is going to be really hard. So I would just not say things are hard, even if things are hard, because things are hard. Don't get me wrong. Make it look like it's easy. Like you kick ass, you're a workaholic, like never sleeping machine. Even if it's not true, that's the impression you want to give. So never admit weakness. Like you always want to be like, oh, it was nothing. It was cake. I crushed it. And like, that's probably not true. We all struggle. I struggle. Like everyone does. But that's not the impression you want to give. You want to give the impression of like, I am a machine and I get this done. All right, let's continue. Being able to graduate in 2020 with my master's was the greatest accomplishment for me. Cool. Then self-doubt within myself disappeared the moment I received my degree. It was only up from this point on. All right, I like the actual sentiment. This can all stay as long as you have like really good stuff before it. But I think self-confidence is a good message to give off. As I reflect on my upbringing and time as a student, I am grateful for all these pieces that fell together for me to be the well-rounded individual I am today. I look forward to translating my experiences in the court to the real thing and to working my way up to a seat at one of the tables that will change the world. Yeah, I actually don't hate that ending paragraph. I mean, I would tweak it a little bit, but the overall sentiment's nice. We just want to make sure all the lead up into it is really powerful, so it's a nice tie-up. There's a lot of decent stuff here. It was almost too much. Like we skimmed the surface of like 10 different things, and we didn't really go deep on any of them. So I would pick a couple of these things that you feel really good about, and it could be your dad, it could be your mom, it could be your master's degree, it could be moot court. The actual story probably isn't that important. It's about how it comes out. So I would pick like one or two of those, go a lot deeper, and go with that. But yeah, overall, like, and then is just Grammarly. Like, I guarantee you, my writing has all sorts of errors too. That's just how writing is. Grammarly will cut that for you and make it very clean. But yeah, thank you again for submitting that. I know it's very vulnerable to put those out there. And yeah. Alrighty. Well, let's take a look. Well, let me look at the Zoom chat real quick. Yeah, so someone asked, could you write about characteristics about yourself, like if you're likable? So, I mean, yes and no. If you say I am likable, they're going to view you as like, there's no way this person's likable, because likable people wouldn't write that. If you can tell a story about like how you work at a firm and you brought in all this clientele, because when you meet with people, you get more people to sign up for like cases than anyone else at your law firm. That could be a good story because you're not saying you're likable, you're kind of telling the story. In the admissions office, they kind of connect the dots themselves. If you're really likable, you can kind of have that come across in your interviews, which many law schools do nowadays. But I definitely wouldn't just say like I am likable. Kind of comes to that like whole green thing I was doing, where you definitely want to show it rather than just tell. And then reasonings like each organization or point you hit in undergrad. Yeah, I mean, you want to give the reasons. I wouldn't touch on every organization or point. You don't want to like have your personal statement be a regurgitation of your resume. In fact, when you do that, you kind of end up going very surface level on everything when you really just want to dive in. Like a personal statement is not all encompassing. You don't have to give all the reasons why you would be a lawyer. You have to give 1 to 2 really compelling reasons. So yeah, and yeah, I do help Canadians with personal statements and stuff. It's just kind of a different system for those of you that are Canadian. I'm sure you're familiar with how it looks different from like what we've looked at today. It's a lot. Well, for one, they give more precise examples and they tend to want you to like explicitly mention the school. And we don't do that in the US typically. It's also a little less artsy than what is my understanding. So yeah. Cool. All right. Well, let's take a few questions and go from there. So when submitting the resume, is it more school related / education or work experience? Well, since we have time, let's just take a look at the Harvard ones so I can show you what Harvard Law puts out, which are, I think, the best examples. The tricky thing with law school resumes is most of them want 1 page. A few will ask for more. They'll say include everything, but that tends to be uncommon. But you definitely want to follow instructions. If there's one thing about law school applications, it's never ignore what they tell you. If you ignore them, they hate that. It's like their most annoying thing. So if you want to get automatically rejected, submit a 3-page resume when they ask for 1 to 2 pages. That's like the surest way to just guarantee, because they'll view you as someone who thinks you deserve special treatment, and they don't want people that think they get special treatment. So let's look at Harvard resumes. So yeah, as you can see, first off, education leads, and then you go into work experience. You want to keep it tight. Well, you see how clean this is? Hold on, let me go full screen on this. So we have, education. There's not a lot of detail, just what they majored in. And then their awards. You don't want to go too deep. You want to have it really easy to read. Then we know they worked at Johnson & Johnson. They worked as a chemistry TA, and they did admissions. And so it's very short. It's right to the point. But we're getting the picture of this person, which is, okay, they're a STEM person. They did biochem. And yeah, fairly straightforward. But definitely you want to keep it short. I'd say you lean more towards your work experience. Schools tend to like that more than education. I mean, you want your education, don't get me wrong, but work experience is really good show. Let's take a look at these other ones though. So yeah, once again, kind of a different format, but same idea. And also Hamlin and McGill. Isn't that the Better Call Saul one? Could be wrong, but yeah, it's in Albuquerque, so I feel like that's right. But yeah, as you can see, so like a little bit more here, they have their senior thesis proposal, which I also don't like that they included a thesis proposal. It's like, did you write the thesis or did you just propose it? Because if you proposed it, don't put it on your resume. Though if they actually wrote it, it's fine. It's just like, did you actually write it? Because when you say proposal, I'm now questioning. But yeah, so okay, they haven't graduated yet. That's why. Then you can see they worked at camp, they worked for Karen Bass, et cetera, et cetera. And then the third one, same kind of deal, different format. In fact, I think this one looks the nicest thus far, but same idea, which is they have a grad school degree, they have their BA, and then they worked at KPMG, Goldman Sachs, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a 2-page one. There's a lot. I would probably cut this down, but same kind of idea, which is shorter. And hold on, let me just copy paste that into the Zoom chat should anyone want to take a look deeper themselves. Okay. There's a few questions, so let's dive back. And I'll just leave it on one while we do that. So yeah, primarily more work related, but you want your school stuff there too. Would it be hard to distinct why I'm likable compared to other people? I mean, yeah, because I mean it's like a written document. So like whether or not you say you're likable or not, they ultimately have to take you at face value, and they have no reason to. So they might believe you, but they also might not, which is a tricky position to be in. Which is why I would tell a story. Like if you tell a story, it can be more powerful because they get to their own conclusion. And yeah, if you've been with the same company, subscribe to them, but you've held a different position, yeah, you can go into the different roles on your resume and just say that. You also don't need a ton of different things in your resume. Well, yeah, as you can see here on this one, we have 3 work positions. So this one has 4, and some of these are like internships. And this was like being a camp counselor. So like they don't have to be fancy stuff. They could be like working at Chipotle. It doesn't have to be crazy. But yeah. Then is volunteer experience necessary? No, you don't need to. I mean, I think volunteering is good, but don't do it for law school purposes. Do it because like you enjoy doing something. If you're doing something just for law school, I'd say generally don't do it, because for one, it's a waste of, like, you're not doing it for the right reasons. And then secondly, they see right through that. If you do 10 hours at a food bank, like, no one thinks that it's pretty transparent. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to volunteer, if there's things that enjoy you, that you enjoy, like, that could be awesome. But I wouldn't do it just for the sake of law school. And then, yeah, don't even mention high school on your resume. Like, it just does not belong at all. I didn't go into that, but yeah. And then, do they favor certifications and awards? I think it depends on what the certification and award is. If it's like an awesome certification, it's hard to get. Like, yeah. If it's like I won the spelling bee in my freshman year of college, no one cares. So it's very case by case. I think people tend to like if you're gonna put that you were on in like the honors list or like the dean's list in undergrad, I mean, you can mention it, but it's not going to do anything for you. I was on the dean's list pretty much every semester. It's not a big deal. A lot of you were too. So it's very case by case. Like, that being said, if you're like Obama's favorite student of the year, not that that's an award, but let's say it was, that might carry some weight. So it's very like case by case. Like, is this act, or like, were you an All-American, like a Division I sport? That's a certificate or a award they're going to care about. If you were like most improved on your like intramural soccer team, no one cares. So it's very, dependent. But as a general rule, that's kind of the gist. All right. Well, let's pull up military awards. Yeah. They love, law schools love military folks. So I would mention that if you do have it. It's always good for details as a person. Yeah, military is actually a very good factor to have in your back pocket. Man, I don't really have time to do a full. We'll take a look at her. So this is someone who I'm familiar with, who got a bunch of really good offers. I'm not going to go into all the details just because of like doxing stuff and like who they are. But this person is someone who got into many law schools. And oh no, this is really doxing information. We're not gonna look at her resume. Do I have her personal statement? Ooh, I do. I do. This is good. Okay. So this one is someone, she applied to, I think, most of the T14s, and she got rejected by 1 out of the 14. So that means, do the math. She got into the rest of them. So let's take a peek, see a personal statement that works. And we're gonna keep this quick for what's worth. I plan on putting this in the ebook. I should talk to her first, but for our purposes, we can look for it. So here we go. And this is one that worked, which I think is always good to see. So here we open, and I'm not going to read in Spanish because I will butcher it, and we don't need that on the internet. But yeah, so we have a Spanish opening, which translates to: you look more pretty when you are quiet. You avoid a lot of conflicts if you stay quiet. This was an expression instilled in me from a very young age. Coming from a family of immigrants who are undocumented, I was never a stranger to the politics of staying quiet. My single mom, who worked 3 jobs to support my family, believed the only way to advance in the US was to work and stay silent. My older sisters and brother followed suit, but I was often a problem. So as you can see, kind of a different approach from what I've been saying, which is you want to get right into it with like who you are, I am sentences, which for what's worth, it's one way to do it. It's not the only way. She took a different approach than what I typically recommend, but it still works. She takes a little longer to kind of get to the point than I do, but it's not bad. And so far, what do we know? It's like, well, her mom thinks she should stay quiet. And this is kind of like the history. It's like when she was a little kid, she was quieter. So let's continue. In 3rd grade, the first Asian American student transferred to our predominantly Latinx school. When he became a victim of bullying, I made it my mission to defend him. My mom was called into the principal's office later that week, and as we walked out of the office, she asked, Spanish, which translates to, you do not know when to shut up, right? So we're kind of telling this narrative of this person, their mom wants them to stay quiet, but they're not. Years later, when I was in middle school, my mom first began to feel sick. During a hospital visit, a doctor claimed my mom was exaggerating her pain. I was surrounded by siblings who looked down her way, but not me. Name, shut up, exclaimed one of my sisters, and apologized on my behalf after I spoke up. When I began working to support my mom's medical expenses in high school, I intervened and stood up to microaggressions made by our supervisors, solely Spanish-speaking employees. So what do we know about this person? It's like, well, when they see injustice, they take action. They're not going to sit back and be quiet. And you can kind of see how this is all coming to one cohesive narrative now. Let's continue. Where were we? Oh, after nearly getting fired, my sister pulled me aside and reminded me that my antics would cost me a valuable source of income. A few years later in high school, I staged a protest when a congressman who had voted against DACA recipients visited our school. Our principal sat me down afterwards and reminded me that there were other quieter ways to express my frustration. So once again, like regardless of the politics, because law schools are pretty open, it's more about who you are. And the point is, this person, when they see things that are unjust, or things that they perceive as being unjust, they take action. They're not going to sit by and be quiet, even if others want them to. And we're kind of telling the story about like, when I see something wrong, I go do something. And it kind of came back to that like early story about being quiet, which, generally I don't love leading with that, but you can see how it works here because she gets the point. All right, we continue. When I began student organizing in college, I was thrilled to finally have an outlet to express my opinions on everything from police abolition to the houselessness crisis. In my daily calls with mom, she would have become upset and warned me of the damage I could cause because I was speaking out. She reminded me of the privileges I held as a citizen, and my speaking out, she believed, could jeopardize my future. I always felt deep embarrassment and regret at the end of the calls. I felt as though I was letting my family down and not being the daughter my mom deserved. So as you can see, like, once again, her mom wants her to be quiet. She just does not jive with that. She wants to like do things. Yeah, she's probably a little bit more, I don't know. We won't go into my politics, but like I think I'm a pretty progressive person. I don't say like houselessness or Latinx, but also like, that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just like, be true to yourself and your admission stuff. But let's continue. This was especially true when, as UCLA student body president, I was called upon to take stances throughout the year that put me in direct opposition with our university's administration. When in my winter quarter, I was asked by the Disabled Student Union, the African Student Union, and other historically marginalized seats to co-lead a sit-in, I was terrified. I knew that my mom would be disappointed, but I also knew that with a riled up student body, I had everything in my hands to create immense change. 16 days later, my conviction proved true when, after discussions with university administrators, we won nearly all that we had asked for. Almost $500,000 in funding for the Black Bruin Resource Center, expanded recruitment efforts for underrepresented students, and increased funding for remote learning for people with disabilities, amongst many other initiatives. So we're showing her like doing things, taking action. She's not being quiet. She's getting things done. Very lawyerly stuff. All right, we'll cut through the rest of it just to the final paragraph. Just I didn't want to do a little Q&A before I have to run, but and for what's worth, like this will be you can access this if you want to. But then we say, with time, my mom's view on my activism has changed as she has watched the meaningful changes I have wrought at my university, local government, and even work. Not long ago, while having tea together, she smiled softly and told me she was proud of my voice. Spanish. Your voice can move mountains, my daughter. As a future civil rights attorney, that is exactly what I intend to do. So as you can see, we had one kind of central narrative. We did talk about lots of things, but look, like she gave details about the sit-in. This was not like some, like, I get action done. She showed what she did instead of telling it. And you can see this kind of central narrative. So, well, is this the best personal statement ever? I don't know. Probably not, because it's really hard to be the best one ever. But this is one that had very good success at the top schools in the country. So I think it's worth seeing. And I'd probably take a more directed approach. But I don't know. Like, I don't tend to do quotes. I'd say that's the one thing where I'm very different from her and like how I form them. But as you can see, like this really did get the point across and it had good success. So I also think it's good to just give at least one example of something that worked. I'll also link the U Chicago personal statements. They have really good ones on their website. And hold on, I always have to share this because it's just so funny to me. But they have a guy that looks like Louis Litt from Suits, which I know some of you watch. I'm actually curious how much you watch it, but all right, send me on the chat if you want them. They're the U Chicago essays, which I will share real quick. Where is he? Oh, this guy. I think he looks like Louis Litt. He kind of gives me that energy. But there's some really good essays on here that I think are good to look at, and they go a little bit artsier than I tend to like. But they're very good. And the main idea is that they stick to essential narrative. They tend to be a little bit more narrative than I go for. But as you can see, there's a lot of detail. There's not a lot of there's a lot of showing instead of telling, and it's just a lot more powerful. Alrighty, well, that's kind of the gist of what we're doing. I'll get the ebook out shortly. I really don't want to promise a timeline on that, just because then if something comes up, I won't get it done. But well, I mean, I will get it done. I just don't want to have it done. It'll be well done before the fall, though. Like, I'd say like May at the latest. So we have plenty of time for those of you applying for next fall. Like, it should be out pretty shortly. And there'll just be an email blast out if you want to download that. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Otherwise, thank you all for coming. I'll hang out if anyone wants to chat about their situation or really anything we talked about today. And yeah, I'll have the recording up on YouTube shortly as well. Oh, I also forgot. I do have a few spots in admissions consulting for next cycle. There'll be an email about it, but if you want it, it's I'm not trying to fill too many because it's like one of those things where it really does take a lot of energy. But here, I'll just share my screen. But like, if you want it, I'm doing 3 spots at 30% off just because I don't want too much stuff. There'll be an email with that. I mean, I guess if you like really want to lock it in, there's only 3 of them, so you might want to jump on it. But also, I'm always available regardless for other stuff. But yeah, the email should go out. I'll just send that now, so it's not delayed. But yeah, I'll hang out. If anyone wants to unmute, I think you're able to if you just want to talk. Yeah, it allows you to if you want to. But otherwise, thank you all for coming. Yeah, thanks for coming, everyone. And I will hang out for a little bit. I have a little bit of time before I have to run. So if anyone wants to chat about like their situation or others, we can talk about that. Um, oh, the GPA. Oh, right. Yeah, sorry. I was talking to someone about their GPA situation, but then I got distracted. So sorry about that. Yeah, so basically, if they're P's, so you'll submit your transcripts to LSAC, which is, LSAC, and they geez, why am I blanking? Oh, they standardize them. So if they are P's, they don't care how your school considers your transcript, they will standardize it. And if they are actually P's in your transcript, they won't count them. Only your community college will GPA will count. So you'll actually have a 4.0 for LSAC purposes. Um, there can be intricacies with that. So I would submit your stuff ASAP. But if they really just did give pass fail, they just don't count in your GPA. So it won't hurt you and you won't be brought down to a 3.0 like you were worrying about. You will actually have a 4.0 in all likelihood. But send that over to LSAC so you can get that locked in ASAP. And then if you need to, you can troubleshoot with them. But given what I've seen in the past, you should just get a 4.0, which is usually not what I'm telling people. I'm usually giving them bad news. And yeah, another person asked, do I think law schools care if they're willing to sacrifice a guaranteed 6-figure job in order to attend law school? No, I mean, I feel like you can kind of come off with a little braggy if you say that. I mean, you could mention your other opportunities, but I don't think salary is what I'd be mentioning. I would be talking more about like what you're up to, other things you could do. I think name dropping, or not name dropping, but like numbers dropping the salary will kind of leave the wrong taste in their mouth. So I wouldn't do that. Alrighty. We still have a few folks, still as possible that people, took off. But I will hang out if anyone wants to chat. And yeah, I'm glad I could give good news. Often with GPA stuff, it's bad news. So it's nice to actually have good one. Oh, and I should say I have a free LSAT session next Wednesday. This was admissions, obviously, but if you need LSAT help still, that'll be up there. Yeah, you should be able to unmute. Is it not letting you? Oh, weird. Let me try turn that on and off again. Sometimes that'll do it. Oh, wait. No, I did have it on. Yeah, and yeah, that's weird, Michelle. If you can't get it to work, here, maybe I'll ask you to unmute. Did that work? All right, that's really odd. I'm not sure what's going on there. Um, And yeah, so let's touch on the other ones. So one person asks about how many T14 schools do you recommend applying to if you have at least a 165 and a 3.5? It depends. If you have a 3.5 and a 165, you're probably going to get denied across the board. If you have like a 4.0 and a 3 point, sorry, a 4.0 and a 165, you'll get some offers. So it really depends. If you have a 165 and a 3.5, you're gonna need to bump your LSAT up if you want to get into those schools. It's unfortunate, but schools have gotten more competitive, so it's harder to get in. And yeah, even then, like, I don't know what your GPA is, but let's assume it's like a 3.6. And you have like a 170 something. Um. What is that? Sorry, I'm blanking. Then yeah, like you'll probably get into like a couple, but with the 165, 3.5, it's gonna be an uphill battle. I mean, there are schools that will take you just out of those like very elite ones. They're not gonna be excited about you. And then do all law schools ask for a diversity statement as well as personal? Yeah, some of them rephrase how they ask for them now, and they'll ask for like a statement of purpose versus a statement of identity. That's how Harvard phrases it, and they're doing it in different ways. But yeah, generally they have the prompts look different, but it's the same kind of idea.
Hi Ben, I'm able to unmute now.
Oh, awesome. Hey, Michelle.
Hi, I wanted to unmute and let you know. So I bought your book from Amazon. I absolutely loved it. So thank you so much for that.
Cool.
And
Yeah, thanks.
also, of course, and also I had a quick question. So I'm applying for the 2025 admissions for fall. But I just had a quick question in regards to that personal statement, that diversity statement, if you have a little bit of time.
Yeah. I'm also happy to take questions.
Great. Okay. So I'm a little stuck on what I should write about. I have two topics that are really important in my life. One of those, I had spinal reconstruction when I was around 17. So that, yeah, that majorly impacts your life. And I
Right.
kind of had to really deal with the new changes in my life from that surgery. But aside from that, I also think that being first generation, having parents that are undocumented really impacted my entire childhood, similarly to how that last review of the personal statement did for that
Mhm.
one girl. Um, but that's the thing. So I currently work for immigration services, and I want to detail my devotion, my passion towards this undocumented immigrant population.
Right.
But in your opinion, my work in this field and my devotion in this field, should I focus on that, and why I would be such a powerful or a good why I would hold a good seat in a law school, in a law course, or